And we are live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Gorgeous Growth Podcast, where we discuss strategies to take your brand to the top. I'm your host, Oscar Guerrero, and today I'm joined by Marissa Lepor. Marissa is a vice president at the Sage Group, an investment bank specializing in M&A for branded consumer products. She plays a key role in the firm's beauty and personal care, apparel and accessory and e-commerce practices. She's actively involved in the finance community, co-founding Ladies in Finance and being a member of the Milken Institute Young Leaders Circle. Marissa has been recognized as a Women of Influence in Finance, Next Gen Woman of the Year, and as a rising star. She graduated cum laude from Columbia University with a BA in economics and a special concentration in business management. Marissa, welcome to the show.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
That's awesome. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about the Sage Group? What is it exactly, and what is it exactly that you do there?
Sure. So Sage is an investment bank. We do mergers and acquisitions for the branded consumer sector. So we operate in three main verticals. The first is fashion and retail. The second is beauty and personal care. And the third is digitally native brands, which naturally overlaps with the first two, but then extends into other categories like home goods and luxury marketplaces and things like that. And basically what we do is when there's a brand that wants to sell a significant stake to a financial investor or a strategic investor, then we work with them to create all the materials, package the business, build the financial model. We know all the buyers, and we basically get the deal done. And sometimes we also do capital raises for brands as well. Most of the time, we really work with founder-owned businesses, even if they've already raised money from venture capital or family offices or are part of a private equity firm's portfolio. But we really know how to work with founders and creatives. And I think we've really built a special niche in the industry, really understanding kind of how to make the process the most bespoke. And so I think there's a lot of financial institutions where it becomes kind of just robotic and they really kind of want to plug and play. But for us, everything is very customized to what an individual founder or shareholder wants to do. We understand that these businesses are often their babies, even if they have kids, it's another kid. And for some people, it's a multi-generational family business. And so we really understand the best way to work with them, teach them about the process, understand that it can be emotional as well, and get them exactly what they are striving to achieve.
That's awesome. So how did you get involved?
At Sage.
Yeah, at Sage.
So my career has spanned many industries. When I was in high school, I interned everywhere from fashion companies like Joie, Equipment and Kern Elliott, to BCBG Generation, to medical device companies, politics, marketing at NASCAR. I used to write for the Huffington Post. And basically from that, I learned all different types of fields, industries, work environments, types of work that one can do. And ultimately, when I was in college, when I was a freshman, I joined an investing club, and you could choose any type of industry that you want to do a research report on. And so I chose the retail industry, always liked retail, was assigned Gap, and spent the next 2 months researching the business. And after we made our presentation, I found out 2 weeks later that Gap acquired Intermix, which at the time was my favorite store. And I was so upset that I didn't know that the deal was going to happen. And I called my mom and I was like, I can't believe it. I should have known. I researched this company for 2 months. And she told me, she said, no, that's M&A. It's secret. Like, you shouldn't have known. And I was like, no, I should have known. I've been researching this for 2 months. And she was like, no, this is M&A. It's not how it works. And it turns out the investment bank that represented Intermix in that deal was Sage. And so I ended up getting connected with Sage and interned for Sage the summer after my freshman year of college, and then did some other internships and ultimately started working at Sage right after I graduated from Columbia. And I've been here ever since.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So like I'm just curious, how was that conversation with Sage? Like, did you contact them and what did you say? What was how was that?
It was a little bit of serendipity where I ended up getting introduced to Mark the winter of my freshman year. And originally, because my mom had been joking with some friends about my whole experience with Gap and Intermix, and then it turned out someone actually knew Mark. And so then he said, "Oh, why don't you come in and chat?" And I thought I was just coming in for some career advice, and it turns out I was actually interviewing for an internship. And so I ended up having like a 4 hour interview and ultimately got the intern offer. And it's ended up being great. I did another internship for a hedge fund the following summer to make sure I really understood all of the different types of fields in finance, and ultimately decided that Sage was where I wanted to be.
Wow, I love that story. That's great. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I
And
mean, like
now
I
I'm
think a
also,
huge part of it was like the drive that whole you must have been very passionate about this research that you were doing and what was happening and like I
yeah,
think
no, it's funny. It turns out that everywhere that I interned when I was in high school was actually a former Sage client. And so I think one of the things that's really important is I think there's a lot of people, especially now, who think that they can kind of construct a particular career path, and instead of pursuing things that they're interested in, they pursue things that they think they're supposed to do. But I think the most important way to figure out what you should be doing is to do the things you're interested in and let things kind of fall into place. Because had I planned on having a career in finance, I'm sure I would have focused on other types of activities, not wouldn't have worked in fashion for multiple summers when I was in high school, or did medical. I was doing research for a medical device company. And I think ultimately you have to do what you're interested in, and then you're going to be the best at it. And you meet the right people who propel you to do what you should be doing next. And I think it's the most authentic and organic way to build a career. Of course, you have to be good at what you do, and you have to work hard and build relationships that are genuine and not just transactional. And I think networking gets to have a very negative connotation in some ways. Networking isn't about asking for favors, it's about building relationships that you have for a lifetime. And so I think it all shows that it's really important to pursue things authentically and genuinely. And hopefully along the way, it continues to build your career, but you also end up building other people's careers too.
yeah. Do you find that when you talk to brand owners, um I don't know, there seems to be in my experience there seems to be a pattern between the owners of the brands that I meet that are successful, that they're doing well, and they're just very passionate about the community that they serve, about the products that they make, versus those who kind of like just got into e-commerce because they were looking for a fast path to get
Yeah,
rich.
totally. I think especially with the growth of e-commerce brands, and we really work with a lot of them in addition to our beauty practice, in which we represented Orbe in the sale to Cow, Too Faced Cosmetics, Glam Glow, Vita Liberata, Jane Iredale, many other brands. We also have a very robust e-commerce practice. So we represented Frankie's Bikinis in the sale to Victoria's Secret, Pure Vita bracelets in the sale to Vera Bradley, Blender's Ivor in the sale to Sapelo, and many, many others. And in those transactions, you end up getting a lot of exposure to other companies that want you to work with them. And we meet a lot of amazing founders and creatives and entrepreneurs and all of that. And in the context of that, you also meet some people who are perhaps less genuine. And there's definitely people who built a business because they want to sell it within 2 years. And while that might be possible, I think, especially in today's market, it's really important to build a company with an authentic brand story, with an authentic reason for being, that's disruptive, that's bringing something new to consumers, whether it's a technology or an ingredient or a material or whatever it may be, depending on the industry. And the businesses that take the time to build the authentic relationships with customers really do benefit in the long run. Perhaps it takes a little bit more time than 2 years to get the type of exit that people are going for, but those are the exits that are the most meaningful. And any business in the same way that you would, if you're building a following on a blog or you're an influencer, the people who are the most impactful are the ones who have the most engaged audience, the ones who have people coming back again and again, the most loyal customers. And then when you build product around it or you build ancillary offerings, those are the ones that become the most successful because you've already built kind of an authority and trust with your consumers, your readers, whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's great. So just to piggyback off of that, do you feel like now things have changed over the past year or so, or do the opportunities continue to be the same for people who have beauty brands, wellness brands?
The beauty industry is evolving a lot, and I think it's always been rapidly evolving. In some ways, people are always looking for that magic potion, right? They always want to look more youthful, younger, glowy, no wrinkles, prevent aging, no acne, all that stuff. And I think there's some amazing products out there, but there isn't one product that seemingly works the best for everyone, which is great because that's why there's a dynamic industry. I think the industry has changed a lot in that there's a lot more brands in the market. There's a lot more product categories that brands are known for. I think, even just thinking about the types of skincare products that people use, now there's so many, there's serums, there's all of the tools, you can gua sha, you can use all of the infrared lights, all of that stuff, that didn't really exist 10 years ago or even really 5 years ago to the same degree. Sure, some of that was in more like estheticians' offices and dermatologists' offices, but the at-home treatments and what people can do at home for their wellness routine, which is also a whole new concept, I think has evolved a lot. And alongside that, the retailers that brands are in has also evolved. And so it used to be easier for brands to start out, I think, from zero. Some brands could launch in a couple doors at Barney's, or they could be in their local beauty retailer. And there were some smaller 1 to 2 door locations that really were a stamp of approval for brands. A lot of that doesn't exist anymore. And so in order for a brand to start, they need investors. Or they need to put in a significant amount of their personal capital in order to grow a brand, because even kind of the smaller chains have 10 plus locations and require a significant amount of inventory to be in the store, and usually proof of sales from e-commerce or something prior. And of course, a lot of brands want to be in ultimately at least Sephora, Ulta, Walmart, or Target, depending on kind of what their profile is, unless they're more in the professional channel. And that's extremely expensive. So I think just the landscape of what it means to start a beauty business and the timeline and when those brands have to raise money has changed a lot. And that's partly why Sage has gotten involved with beauty brands at earlier stages. So it used to be that we would really only work with brands when they wanted to sell a significant stake. It doesn't have to be a majority, but it could be a significant minority, and we would be more focused on larger deals. But now, because beauty brands are having to raise money at earlier and earlier stages in their growth trajectory, we've adjusted our business model as well so that we can better assist them through that process, and they can focus more on running the business and building the brand, and we can handle building the financial model, building the materials, talking to investors, arranging all the meetings. And the thing is, we talk to these investors all the time, whether it's the public companies and the strategics like the L'Oreals and the Estee Lauders and the Cows and the Codys and the More Pacific and all of those different companies. And we also know the beauty investors, whether they're the ones who invest 1 million, a couple 100,000, or the ones who invest tens or hundreds of millions into a brand. And so when we bring a brand to them, we know it's something that they're interested in, and they know that we're kind of also a seal of approval. We vouch for the fact that we wanted to work with them. We like the team. We think the product kind of is differentiated and can stand on its own. So we really, because the beauty industry has evolved a lot in terms of the dynamics and the retailers and how much money it takes to really get a brand off the ground, and not only get it from 0 to a million, but that 1 million to 10 million in sales can be really, really tough for brands. And we try and figure out ways so we can always be supportive of the founders and the creatives.
Yeah, that's, when you talk about like going reach a brand that reaches its first million versus one that can get to 10 million, that's recently, at least I would say over the past year, maybe just a little bit more, there's been a lot of turbulence in the industry because, before the you could pretty much run Facebook ads and have a website and have a decent brand and get a following and do well. But since the space has become more crowded, acquisition costs have gone up. There's been a big push for a lot of brands who to go multi-channel and to actually get on store shelves. And while I think like that might be a great approach, but I'm not sure it's a great approach for everyone. And I think it really depends on the stage of the company. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Totally. I think for investors, ultimately, having an omni-channel business is the ideal scenario for most brands. Naturally, there are some brands that aren't suited for omni-channel because some are professionally different brands that need to really be sold in the professional channel. Some, could be really mass products, which selling them online through their own website doesn't make sense in kind of a large scale way, and I can get into that. But I think for most brands, being everywhere your customer shops, whether that's online, at retail, and sometimes even at your own stores, if the brand can handle it, is really the best way and the best way to build a community. And I think there's different types of beauty brands, of course. There's the mass brands, there's prestige, there's luxury. I think the price point is very crucial in terms of building a brand online. And if you can imagine that the cost to acquire customers now has definitely increased even in the past 2 years and beauty customers often purchase a wide range of products. So there isn't an exclusively luxury consumer and an exclusively mass consumer in the way that perhaps it used to be. There's plenty of luxury consumers where in their makeup bag, not only do they have a $300 moisturizer, but they also have a sunscreen that they bought at the local drugstore and a chapstick that they've been using for the past 15 years that they love. And so while that's great for the beauty industry because the customer demographic is so broad for many of these brands, it's also challenging because the mass brands are fighting for the eyeballs of the luxury consumers on social. And so they really don't have the CPAs that they would have to spend in order to acquire those customers are more often greater than the average order value that customers would be purchasing. And when you think about e-commerce, it's really important to be profitable on a customer's first order. So we look at that and we say, what is the cost to acquire that customer? What are you spending on the acquisition marketing? And then not only looking at that versus the average order value in terms of sales, but really looking at that in terms of contribution margin. So what is the actual money that's going to the business when you take out the cost to produce the product and also the cost to ship the product? Like, what are the credit card fees and the shipping fees and stuff like that? And another reason why it can be challenging for mass brands to really grow their businesses online is because in order to get a free shipping threshold if you're a customer placing an order, you would have to purchase a lot of different products. And that's great if you're a big fan of the company and you know that you want to buy these 3 to 5 products or more. But for a new customer, it's difficult to get that customer not only to try one product, but to actually try multiple in order to meet, maybe it's a $30 shipping threshold or $50. So you get a lot of traffic to your site, not a lot of conversion. And so that's kind of where it gets to be tricky. So I think the best way for a lot of beauty brands to grow, if they're, a lot of people come to me and they're like, okay, almost starting from zero. What should I do? Marketing is so expensive. I'm not an influencer. It's very tough in this market. It's hard to start. And some of it is saying, okay, I'm going to go to these local, maybe you're a skincare company. It's really more about going to who are some of the well-known estheticians and facialists, and will they use your product in their facials, and then maybe they'd want to sell it. And are they kind of someone who can vouch for a brand? Do their consumers really follow their advice? Not only the consumers who come in for facials, but perhaps people who follow those kind of educators on social, right? Because a lot of the celebrity and well-known facialists and estheticians have a large following. In the same way, if you're more of a fragrance company, perhaps you can sell not only in a beauty store, but you can sell in like a luxury apparel and accessory store. So there's a lot of different ways, but I think really building a halo around the brand is much harder now and takes a lot of effort. And to the extent that you can get your brand around people who are considered like beauty educators, influencers, but not only lifestyle influencers, people who really kind of offer a very curated selection of suggestions, or just really anything where you can get your brand to be exposed to a lot of people who are the right people who can then facilitate more of the word of mouth. I think that's the most important, because just growing a brand through social is very difficult right now. And of course, there's definitely one hit wonders like K18 on TikTok almost seemingly blew up overnight. But it's hard to plan for that.
Yeah. On top of that, I feel like the whole thing, putting your eggs in one basket. I mean, I think brands have learned, hopefully they've learned, right? Like we had the whole fiasco with Facebook and the privacy issues, and the inefficiencies that they had for a while with the ads. And now we have a lot of people that I'm talking with on TikTok are getting a lot of followers. Their brands are doing really well, but I get worried for them when I start reading articles that talk about the possibilities of TikTok going away, you know?
Yeah, no, it's scary. I think, a lot of beauty brands right now and a lot of brands in general are really focused on this like content commerce model. So in some ways, Glossier was one of the original brands that did that, where they were a block. They had no product at the beginning, built themselves as an authority in the space, almost launched a brand telling consumers they're providing them with everything that they want, that also they're not getting from other brands. And that was a huge differentiator in the space, and I think is why they developed such a cult following. But there's plenty of other brands across industries that also have this kind of content commerce model. And not only does it build the brand as an authority, but it also allows the brand to have a direct relationship with customers. So when the platforms change, whether it's Facebook or TikTok or whatever it may be, customers end up being loyal to the brand, not necessarily loyal to the platform. So they can be a lot more nimble. And ultimately, if they need to start launching content on their own website or their own Instagram channel versus really relying on like paid marketing and other tactics, they can do that because customers are following the brand and the content in the community, and they'll go wherever that community happens to be. And I think that in the wave of brands getting less confident on the staying power of certain marketing strategies, really owning a relationship with your customer and being able to take them with you to whatever platform is kind of the main platform at the time will be key. But naturally, only the brands that have developed that relationship with their consumer will be able to do that. So I think that will be a really big differentiator in this next wave of social, especially if TikTok does end up having those challenges.
Yeah. Okay. Now, earlier, you mentioned the importance of being profitable on your first sale, right? Is any focus placed on LTV at all? And if so, is there a timeline that you specify when you look at LTV?
Sure. So when we look at customer lifetime value, we we always look at that in proportion to the customer acquisition cost. And so that ratio is called the LTV to CAC. And even still, when we look at customer lifetime value, we're really looking at it on a contribution profit basis. So again, that's gross sales, then net sales, then you get gross profit, and then you get contribution profit once you've stripped out all of the cost it takes to make a product, plus the variable cost of shipping that product to a consumer, the credit card fees and shipping fees and anything else. And so that's really the profit that is associated with an order. And it's really important to look at that number instead of gross sales when you're looking at a ratio to customer acquisition cost. And then when we look at that ratio, the LTV to CAC, we typically look at it over 3 years. For growing brands, it also depends on kind of the nature of the product selection and how fast a customer might run out of a product. But generally, we like to look at it over 3 years. Usually around a 3 times LTV to CAC over 3 years is good. We've worked with brands that have much higher, and we work with brands where, because of the repeat nature, it takes a little bit longer to get to that 3 times, but then it kind of scales up faster. And I think there's different ways a brand can really increase the customer lifetime value. One is just by really focusing on repeat sales. Naturally, email, text, and organic social are great ways to increase for retention marketing to increase repeat customers and build customer lifetime value. But then you also have to make sure you have enough product categories and offering in order to bring something new to customers. So sometimes they might just be coming to the website to replenish the product that they already had, which is great. But then do you have gifting options? Do you have something where you've really earned their trust in one category and now you can kind of slowly launch another category? And so I think kind of building that relationship with customers really helps increase LTV. Naturally, we were talking about omnichannel before. Naturally, once a brand goes omnichannel, it's a lot harder to measure the true LTV because sometimes customers discover the brand at a retailer and then replenish online, or they discover the brand online and then they replenish at the retailer, but then their third purchase, they replenish online. So, there's always limitations to the data. But that being said, even if omnichannel makes it a little bit harder to fully analyze your true customer lifetime value, I think it's more important to be able to provide the products to that customer. So if they walk into a retailer and they're thinking of they need a new lipstick or they need a new fragrance or they need a new sunscreen, whatever it may be, and they liked yours, but they need a new refill now, that you can still be the brand that they go to versus discovering something new.
That makes sense. Now, thank you for that. I think a lot of people needed to hear that. And it kind of goes on to the next topic that I wanted to ask you about. So you mentioned email, SMS marketing, social media marketing as great channels to increase LTV. A lot of the brands that we speak with as an agency tell us that they're interested in revenue. So how much money can you make me, right? And that's always kind of hard for us because for me, it's not about revenue. It's more about retention marketing, LTV, right? Increasing that as a metric. If a brand is focused on, reaching that like $5 million mark or $10 million mark without really considering contribution margin, what would you say to them?
So I think revenue obviously is important, but you really want customers who are also high quality and engaged, because those are the customers that are going to come to you even when marketing costs are going up because you've already acquired them. So email, text, and anything else that's retention marketing focused, perhaps you don't need to do customer acquisition retention marketing on social, but those less expensive marketing tactics for retention are super important. And investors really like to see that brands have an engaged email or text or whatever it may be. Even sometimes print mail can be really effective for certain products if you can provide a really nice kind of almost like a lookbook, or a catalog would be too thick, but sometimes it's like a 4-page pamphlet or something like that. And of course, at the beginning, there's going to be months where brands are not profitable or years when brands are not profitable. But in order to really showcase to investors that there's a lot of viability in the brand and the business, being profitable on first order is a really good metric. So we understand that sometimes brands are profitable on first order, but then they're not profitable as a business because they have other expenses and they haven't reached kind of an economies of scale where some of those expenses would get paid for just by the operations of the business. But I think there's a big difference between being unprofitable as a whole and being unprofitable on first order. And in prior times, a few years ago, there was definitely more leniency to being unprofitable on first order as a means to acquire a base of customers and then grow later. I would say the tolerance for that is much less now, as we've seen how quickly marketing costs can rise. And at this point, if brands aren't profitable on first order, there's something to figure out, I think, versus figuring out business operations. So if your clients are very focused on building revenue, that's great. But if they're not profitable on first order, I think definitely need to take a step back and say, are we spending money in the right places? Is our content really driving home the values of the brand? Is it on brand? Do people recognize that this is affiliated with the brand even without the logo, because there's an aesthetic or kind of an overall emotion or tone that relates to the brand? And I think it's really more about building community and consistent engagement, even if sometimes customers don't purchase from an engagement, but it keeps them in the community. That's super important too.
I see. Now, are there any other attributes that you want to mention that investors might look at in a beauty business?
Sure. So one is the product and the brand itself. I think I'm sure I've mentioned that earlier in the podcast, but the product and the brand and differentiators are really, really important. Investors are always looking at how a brand is performing today or at the time that they're looking at the investment, but it's also really important to think about what the brand is going to do in the future, right? Because they're not investing in what the brand is going to do today. They're really investing in what the brand is going to do over the next several years. So having proven success across a few categories or a few different products with a path to grow to more product categories is very important. So first is brand, second is product, third is growth. And I would say all of those are very important. Fourth is just the financial profile, right? And one of the things that's great for beauty is that the gross margin on a lot of beauty products can be very, very high, which gives you a lot to play around with in terms of marketing and other expenses. But kind of the product gross margin is super important to investors. And the other thing is really just kind of you were talking about revenue, the omni-channel expansion, right? So one is your e-commerce. Are you profitable on e-commerce? Are you getting repeat customers? What's LTV to CAC? Super important. But then the other is at wholesale. And if your brand is already at wholesale, not only looking at the sales that the company is selling to the wholesale account, but also what the sell-through is. And if that wholesale account is reordering and what rate they're reordering new product to fulfill their inventory, that is really, really important. And nowadays, investors, while it's exciting for them to see that a brand has a contract with a particular wholesale account, what they really want to see is the sell-through at those accounts. And I would say that those are some of the key things that investors are looking at, especially as brands are in their earlier stages. Later on, when brands are looking to do that like really significant transaction and sell to one of the big industry strategics, I would say the brands that get the highest valuations have a few key characteristics. One is the brand, of course, and the brand will have a cult following. There's a heritage. It's been around for a while. Two is like they're really seen as an industry leader in the category that they're in. And so whether it's about an ingredient or a technology or an experience and the way that customers experience a product is different, that's really important as well. Four is the omni-channel distribution and having proven success across different channels and also geographies at that point. Most of the time in those really big transactions when brands are sold for hundreds of millions of dollars, they already are distributed around the world. And of course, also important is profitability.
Nice. That was awesome. I think that you've given us a lot of golden nuggets. I mean, it's a lot of great information here. This has been amazing. I want to thank you. I mean, I'm really, I'm honored to have this opportunity to talk with you and share everything with the world. If people wanted to follow you, where could they find you?
Sure. So the best place would be on LinkedIn or Instagram. My LinkedIn is, you can just search my name, Marissa Lepor. Instagram, I'm also at Marissa Lepor. And if you message me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to respond and we can always chat on email or on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Have a great
Thank
one.
you. This was awesome. Thank you so much.